हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी।
Hari
हरे
Hari
कृष्णा
Bo.
माता जी।
Hari Krishna, Sundari Priya, Hari Bo Kapilji.
हरे कृष्णा माता जी।
Jai Ho.
Caru, how are you doing?
Doing okay. Got back pretty late last night from Salt Lake City, but we don't go on till 11, so plenty of time to prepare. Do you have the verse in front of you as well?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
So after Kirtan, we'll ask you to make the first comments, if that's okay.
Sure,
Go
sure.
ahead, Ishan.
Yeah, I'll get to.
All
And
right.
Ishan is doing the kirtan today.
Go ahead, Ishan. Let's hear your wonderfully baritone voice.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hari Krishna Vinita. Hari Bo. Jai Ho.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hari
Uh,
Bo. So if anybody's joining us on Facebook Live, you're welcome to jump into the Zoom call as well if you want to participate. We're at 801-787-1510. The password is Govinda. It's right there in the Facebook comments. Otherwise, we're just going to get started here. We've got Govinda, Dave, we've got Ras Vilas, Amrita Sundari, we've got Kapil and Benita, Ishan, Sundari Priya, and yours truly so far. So Ishan's going to lead the first kirtan, and then the last kirtan is going to be led by the Gol family. And in between, we're going to study Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1-14. Komal Dinesh is joining us as we speak. And we'll ask the Sharma family also after the kirtan to make the initial, read the verse and the purport and make the initial comments on this particular verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So thanks everyone for joining us. Sunday, August 16th for our weekly Sanga, Salt Lake City, but anyone else is welcome to join in as well. Good morning, Kamal. Haribo. Thank you very much. Harinama Shri Krishna Sankirtan Ki Jai. So what thoughts have you had about this verse, Shay Sharma? Can we read the verse and purport and comment on it?
Sure, Prabhuji. Apan sansitam ghoram yatte nama vivashgunam tat saddha vimuchyate yatta vibheti swayam bhayam. Living beings who are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by the fear personified. So, should I read the purport or?
Please go ahead.
Purport. Vasudev or Lord Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller of everything. And as such, he is feared by all others. There is no one in creation who is not afraid of rage of the Almighty. Great asuras like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others who were very powerful living entities were all killed by the personality of Godhead. And the Almighty Vasudeva has empowered his name with the powers of his personal self. Everything directly related to him is identical with him. It is stated herein that the name of Krishna is feared even by fear personified. This indicates that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. Therefore, the name of Krishna is as powerful as Lord Krishna himself. There is no difference at all. Anyone, therefore, can take advantage of the holy names of Lord Shri Krishna even in the midst of the greatest dangers. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by force of circumstances, can help one obtain freedom from the hurdle of birth and death. The verse talk about one of the very common thing, which is fear. I think there are a lot of fears. There are a lot of anxieties. I think on the day of Balram Jayanti, George Prabhu, myself, and some of us, we were talking about what are some of the top 10 fears or 5 fears, irrational fears. There are fears for losing your power, position, losing the prestige. Sometimes it is as simple as having an irrational fear to come in front of people and share your views, opinions. Public speaking is one. So there are a lot of fears. And I think if we try to break this down, fear, the analogy is face everything and rise, or forget and run. And sometimes it is false evidence appearing real. I was reading a book on the topic of anxiety. There are a lot of books written on fear and anxiety. There are a lot of YouTube videos. And there are a lot of remedies. There are a lot of suggestions people provide, our acharyas has provided in the past. There is one thing which is common is meditation and meditating. And yesterday we were talking with one of our good friends on the topic of chanting. And Vinita, myself, a lot of us contributed and we provided the reasons that why do we chant. And this one, I think it is very timely that why do we chant or why one should chant or why one must chant. There are 2 or 3 stories that comes to the mind. As the last few sentences, I'll read them again. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by the force of circumstances. So Uttara is a great example in Bhagavatam. We'll read in the further chapters. It says, Pahi Pahi Mahayogi Deva Deva Jagatpate Nanyam Tvad Bhaye Pakshe Yatra Mrityu Parasparam. I think she chants and she chants maybe because of the force of circumstances. Then there is an example of Ajamil, even though it's not a good example in this category, but he, at the time of death, he uttered the name of Narayana. And then we all know the story. And then I think the story which I resonate the most is Draupadi. We can say it is circumstance, which we can say that she knew about it, but she raised her hands and she said, Govinda, help me. We don't need more examples, but I think one of the sentences in the purport I love the most, which says that his Krishna's names are non-different than Krishna. And that's the reason we chant, we should chant, and we must chant. So Prabhu, that's my understanding on this one.
The holy names put all their blessings to shame. Krishna Govinda chanted anywhere, everywhere. The mercy Shakti is fully there. A divine app to restore your mental software. Zap the malware, restart your heart. Tap the reservoir of loving care. No hard and fast rules, no lessons, no schools. The bliss of bhakti rare yet free for the taking. Only you declare your heart is aching in divine love awakening.
Haribol.
Nam
The Prabhu says, you
Namakari Bahodani Jasarvishakti Statapitani Mata Shmaranera Kala Itadishi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdive Midishami Ajani Nanuragaha. The full potency, especially the mercy potency. The mercy is the best potency. One may have power and knowledge and sovereignty, but if that's not tempered by mercy, then one is not considered to be a truly great personality. The way that one displays one's true greatness is by being able and willing to give people that which they do not deserve. Anybody can administer tit for tat. Anybody can administer justice. But only the Supreme Personality of Godhead can waive justice occasionally in favor of mercy. He knows everything past, present, and future. He knows your past lives. He knows what you're capable of in the future, and he knows the state of your heart. So even according to the ordinary estimation, one may be considered not qualified, not eligible. The Lord sees the inner self. He doesn't just see the externals like the body, the gender, the nationality, and so on and so forth. So it is said the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as a gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. So the mightiest quality of the mightiest living beings, according to Shakespeare at least, is mercy. What were you going to say when I interrupted you? When I mercilessly interrupted you?
No, I was just saying that not only chant, but chant in the tempo that you just suggested.
Sundari Priya, you have some, are you there? Amrita Sundari, sorry. Amrita Sundari. Have you given thought to this verse?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Krishna Prabhu, all glories to all the assembled devotees. For a second, it seemed like what is the need to do anything else than to chant? And then okay, of all the problems that we are fearful of or anxious about, we don't consider the problem of repeated birth and death, because it's not the part of the natural social consciousness, the collective consciousness of us all. But the Shonika Rishi is saying, just by unconsciously chanting, by force, or even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, you can be freed from the bondage of the cycle of birth and death forever, unconsciously chanting. And then with the being in Kali Yuga, we are forced with so many anxieties and so many norms and so many necessities. Our minds are always agitated, and we're just always working hard to get rid of those problems. Just to solve one problem, you end up in the second. And then it seems like meaningless, just what's going on here? How do we simplify our life so we can just chant better? That should be our central occupation, and that's what Prabhupada said. Just chant, 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 it's like too simple to accept and practice, I guess. It's just too straightforward and too simple and too beautiful to accept as one's goal in life.
In the third canto, I think, Yata turur mula nasayachana tatskanda bujo pusha pranopahada chaitendriyam tataiva savaram achuteja. One fear that you're released from when you're chanting is the fear of displeasing other people or going against cultural norms. Almost inevitably, culture wants to pressure you into competing, achieving, sometimes putting ethics aside in order to get ahead, neglecting other people, lacking compassion and empathy for other people. But when you take your time and your energy to honor the Lord by chanting His holy names, taking prasadam, associate with devotees, and serve Him, what you're doing is you're watering the root of the tree. And when you water the root of the tree, all the other branches, flowers, and leaves become nourished. So whether society condemns you or approves you, whatever society does or what other people, sometimes when you become a devotee, relatives get upset. They probably wouldn't be nearly as upset if you were taking drugs or going from bar to bar at midnight. They probably wouldn't be nearly as upset about that as they would about you becoming a devotee. But one of the fears that a devotee is released from is the fear of displeasing others. We go through our life on edge and anxiety, stressed out. Is my boss pleased? Is my spouse pleased? Are my fellow employees pleased? Are my teacher pleased? Are my children pleased? But when you please Krishna, you're watering the root of the tree. And if Krishna is pleased, then everybody is pleased. We talked last night about Bhisma. Bhisma was a character in the Mahabharata who never put himself forward. He worked always behind the scenes, even though he was arguably the greatest personality of all the Pandavas and all the Kauravas. The story wasn't really about him, but it wasn't about him, but it was about him, because without his training, without his advice, without his wisdom, without his love, without his compassion, none of the other things would have worked together or come together as well as they did. And yet he always took the back seat. He never put himself forward. First, he worked to promote his father. He gave up his kingdom, gave up marriage, gave up having children in order to protect his father. Then he promoted his brothers, Chitraganda and Vichitravirya. And when they died without children, then he persuaded Vyasadeva to have children through their wives, Ambika, Ambalika. And then those boys, Pandu and Dhritarashtra, he nourished them, he trained them up, he protected them. And then when Pandu died an early death, he promoted Yudhisthira. And ultimately, when it came to the showdown between Yudhisthira's army and Duryodhana's army, and it just so happened that Bhisma was the head of Duryodhana's army, and that was the army that opposed Yudhisthira becoming the king, Bhisma performed the ultimate sacrifice and told the Pandavas how to kill him, so that they could kill the general of Duryodhana's army, ultimately defeat the army, and Yudhisthira would become king. All that Bhisma was working behind the scenes, unrecognized, unnoticed, invisible, you might say, in many ways. And yet nothing that Bhisma did, there were other people who were more grandstanders, who had more showmanship, who had more dazzle, more sizzle factor. Even Arjuna, Bhima, they're talked about, they're glorified a lot more in the Mahabharata. Karna, even though they all had more space, they had more words written about them, they had more glorification about them. Krishna noticed each and everything that Bhisma did. He took special notice that what society missed or what others missed, Krishna didn't miss a single thing. And he showed that in two significant ways. That when Bhisma was lying on the bed of arrows, he should have been in agonizing pain. He wasn't in any pain at all. Krishna alleviated his pain. Krishna alleviated his pain to such a degree that he was totally lucid in his mind. We would have been out of our minds with distraction, with hysteria, if we had even one arrow, through our shoulder or our little finger cut off. But Bhisma had every square inch of his body through and through with arrows, and Krishna gave him complete lucidity. And so when Yudhisthira was paralytic and despondent due to the loss of so much life, he was refusing to take the throne. So Krishna sent Yudhishthira to Bhisma lying on the bed of arrows, and Bhisma relieved his despondency, consoled him, inspired him to become king after all. And then having done that, it was time for Bhisma to finally leave. And Krishna, Tribhuvanam Kamana Tamara Baram Ravi Kura Garam Baram Dadane Bapura Laka Kurarita Rajam Vijaya Shakur Rashtu Ashtu Medavaja. Standing there with the dhoti bright like lightning, with the color of the tamal tree, with a smile on his face, in full vision of Bhisma, Krishna gave Bhisma the ultimate blessing of being personally present before him at the time of leaving his body. So Krishna is showing us at the last that he was fully cognizant, fully aware, and fully appreciative, especially of Bhisma over and above all others, because Bhisma took no credit for himself. He didn't care for the approval, for the acclaim of society. He simply had his mind fixed like a bee fixed on the honey inside of the flower at the lotus feet of Krishna. So this is one fear which we're released from when we come to Krishna consciousness. We realize that we don't have to please every Tom, Dick, and Harry. We don't have to please everybody. We just have to please Krishna. And mostly in the course of following Krishna and becoming Krishna conscious, devotees become perfect ladies and gentlemen. Their aim is not to please others, but they end up being very pleasing by nature to others. It doesn't mean that everybody will appreciate your devotional qualities, but it does mean that from Krishna's point of view, your heart is right, you're moving forward, you're blessed, you're favored, you're full of peace and joy. Some people may not like that, but that's okay. That's the last thing that you're going to worry about. I remember one year in the Provo Daily Herald, after we had the Festival of Colors, they actually printed it. It wasn't so shocking that someone wrote this comment, but it was actually shocking that the Daily Herald printed it. And the lady said, the only way those people could be that happy is if there were drugs in the powders. So if someone accuses us of being high, we admit it. We're high on the holy names of the Lord. We're focused, pleasing Krishna. We're free from the worry and anxiety, trying to please everybody at all times. What other fears does Krishna consciousness help one out with? Who wants to jump in at this point? Kamo, any thoughts?
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Haribo.
Firstly, that was a lovely kirtan. Thank you. And about the fears, actually listening to somebody, there was a monk who said, who gave a very small example, but he was mentioning that a lot of times children, young children, when they don't see their parents around, they start crying because of the fear. They feel they're lost. And they get so scared that they start crying until they don't see their parents. Once they see their parents, they again get back and they're consoled. So I think if one can understand or if one can accept that one can accept Krishna or the Lord as their parent or as their supportive, and the fact that he is present everywhere. So one, you're never alone, you're never left without him, and the fact that he is there to take care of you, then you can actually let go of that fear. Then you would not be that fearful about anything. I thought that was very beautiful about that. It takes time, at least for me, to understand and accept and realize that he is present, he is there to take care of you at every moment, at every step. So that realization itself will probably help to get rid of any fear that a person might have. And I think in the olden times, a lot of people would name their children after Krishna or after the Lord, so that even unconsciously, even when they're not thinking about the Lord, they're still taking the name of the Lord. So this was understood. Initially we used to think, why is everybody named? why all the everybody's names like this? Now slowly we realize why, because they even unconsciously they wanted to be chanting their names. So that was one of the reasons that people named their children after the Lord, that consciously, unconsciously we are chanting his name. And
Because of the example of Ajamil, right?
example, sorry?
Of Ajamil, right?
Yes, yes. And they say that the name of the Lord would even be bigger than the Lord himself. So it's it is it is lovely to chant his name. That's all I have, Prabhuji. Please add
Can
to
you
it.
think of any story of someone who is in great danger and rather than take retaliatory action, they just calmly continued chanting?
I think the story which I spoke last time about the forest, the devouring forest, where uh, the cows go into the forest and it starts burning. All of all of the friends just leave it to Krishna. That please save us. They don't do anything else. They just trust and they say you are the one who's going to take care, and everything is taken care of. He just follows the fire. So I think it just falls in place over here.
Yeah, so that was a good story that you mentioned last week when the forest fire came. All the cowherd boys, they didn't call 911. They didn't look for, they didn't set up a bucket brigade. Of course, we have to do whatever we can do. We can't
Yeah.
just sit back and let Krishna do everything. But their immediate response was to call on Krishna to help them. What other story where someone had some great danger and they just chanted Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. There wasn't really anything they could do because the force against them was so much more powerful. There really wasn't much they could do except chant. Does anyone jump in with?
Amrish Maharaj, Gajendra Moksha.
I was thinking Ambarish. What was the story of Ambarish?
I mean, he was fasting Ekadasi, and then which Rishi? Durvasa Muni came, and then he stated that, okay, wait for me, I'm gonna come, take a bath and come back. And then time just elapsed, and Durvasa Muni just did not come. He was taking his own time, and then that time to break the fast was just flying by. So on suggestion by his guru and other acharyas, they suggested, okay, you don't eat prasadam, but at least just to break the Ekadasi, Nirjal Ekadasi, you just take a drop of water. So he just took a drop of water on suggestion. He didn't want to, but otherwise, if he didn't, then he would have to be fasting forever. So he took a drop of water, and then Durvasa Muni came, and then because of his mystic powers, he realized that he took a drop of water and he started accusing Amrish Maharaj, and then he took a hair and then just produced a demon to kill Amrish Maharaj, and then immediately Sudarshan Chakra came, and then he immediately killed the demon, and then he was after Durvasa Muni. And then Amrish Maharaj was just chanting Hare Krishna immediately. Then Sudarshan Chakra came, and then he ran in all lokas, and eventually he reached to Lord Vishnu, Vishnu Loka, and then Lord Vishnu said, well, it's out of my control. I am controlled by my own devotees. You better go to Amrish Maharaj and pray to him. So Durvasa Muni went to Amrish Maharaj, and then that's where Amrish Maharaj, prays to the Lord that if I have done true bhakti, please take away the Sudarshan Chakra. And that's where, so the moral of the story is, he's the controller of everything, everything exists, everything we can perceive, everything we can see in our dreams, but he's controlled by his devotees. That's what he says.
Very good. It said of Ambarish Maharaj, Savaya Mana Krishna Pararabinda. It said the mind of Maharaj Ambarish was always sheltering at the lotus feet of Krishna, just like a swan dives into the stem of the lotus flower. Similarly, Maharaj Ambarish's mind was always sheltered at the lotus feet of Krishna. And so, as Kamal said, he fully believed that Krishna would protect him. He had full faith. And even when that fearsome, that fire weapon, which would have made any ordinary person absolutely lose it, terrified, was coming towards him. He just without any fear, in peace and calm, continued chanting Hare Krishna. And the one that ended up getting fearful, Tada Biddaret Udviksha, Shra Prayasham Chanishphalam. Shra Prayasham means, Shra Prayasham means the one that ended up getting terrified. It wasn't Ambarish, but it was Durvasa.
He was running in all lokas.
It says, Tada Biddaret Udviksha, Shra Prayasham Chanishphalam. Durvasa became terrified about his own well-being. Durdasa Durdave Bitu. Bita means he was extremely full of fear. Dikshu Prana Paripsha. And then as a result of his fear and being chased by the Sudarsana Chakra, he started running here and there all over the universe. So we find that whereas devotees don't feel fear, those who try to threaten or attack the devotees end up themselves being the ones that end up getting terrified. I notice Anjali's joined us here. Anjali, do you want to say anything and introduce yourself to our Salt Lake City satsang? Anjali joins a lot of our talks during the week, and she always makes dazzlingly brilliant comments and suggestions. I'm sure that you have something appropriate to say here, Anjali. Can you enrich us with insight?
Well, first and foremost, Hare Krishna and Dandavat Pranams, Charu Prabhu. This is the first time that we are actually able to talk instead of just message. And I find it hilarious because the comment that I have about my fear is actually not so appropriate. So being absolutely honest with you, and that's why I'm also saying thank you in this opportunity, because my fear of being able to sing Kirtan is that I'm not safe. I'm not safe while singing because I do not come from a great lineage of parents or family that are Vaishnav. Quite the opposite. When you mentioned that family would prefer you going bar night after night instead of the temple, that's me. That happened to me. I actually did not get accepted, and even in my temple, I was so afraid to even say that I was going to the temple because how little knowledge I had of Shastra. You know, the Indian community here in Phoenix, quite knowledgeable from birth, literally. So for me, my fear when I was singing Kirtan, was I saying da or da? Was I saying Rama or calling Rama? Who was I really calling? So if anything, I don't have my parents to go back to be strength. One of them is already gone. The other one was never in heart anyways. I don't have the strength of my temple as strong as I have with your kata because your hours are earlier before I go to work. So I can't go to my temple's Srimad Bhagavatam classes because I've already started work. And then my fear is that when I sing Kirtan, and it has happened to me, where since losing weight, even some devotees have started private messaging me some really inappropriate stuff, trying to get more things out of me than just my voice. So in my case, my fear of being unsafe while singing Kirtan on who's going to reach out to me after this Kirtan tonight. Am I going to be safe going back to my car? So for me, I go to the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and I choose my patron saint of Pingala, the prostitute, because in my faith and in my idea and thinking, a prostitute is no different than a neurosurgeon. They're both using their bodies for the task at hand, just different ways. And sometimes paid just the same, if not even more. So Pingala, She literally every single night was opening herself up as vulnerable gets. But every person that was coming through, she literally kept thinking, none of these are as close as Krishna. And that is what I keep telling. And I actually had to tell someone this morning, what you're seeing, I'm as old as could be your daughter. Please don't look at me that way. And of course, a couple days later, the devotee apologized. And I'm like, don't worry, you're my god brother. You're only seeing something of your little sister. That is all, no forgiveness needed. And I can't take my father because he's no longer with us. So I have to take hold onto our Guru, our spiritual master, onto Prabhupada. When I go see Prabhupada at the temple, I hold onto his little pinky on his toes, because that for me, I have horrible discipline. So I can't say that I have Shraddha. I barely have Nishta, but I definitely have the desire to hold on to his little pinky toe, because I can physically hold on to that. Then I can hold on to anything else. And that's where I take away the fear. Does that make sense?
Yes. Sundari Priya, I notice you nodding in resonance here. Do you want to respond?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Shri Prabhupada, and my obeisances to all the assembled devotees here. Thank you, Anjali Mataji. I've been there on the Bhagavatam class in the morning, and we're really inspired by all your messages. And thank you for sharing your heart today. We all, this birth is actually not human life is not to live in a prideful manner. We actually should be fearful. I personally think if we don't have fear, we'll never remember Lord. I mean, look at Prahlad Maharaj. Every time he was thrown by his own father. I mean, he was 5-year-old kid. Who would do that? Even a demon won't do it, but
Top demon did. Top demon.
I mean, he was thrown in a spit of snakes. He was thrown from the edge of the cliff by his own father that gave him birth. I mean, nobody has done that. One senior devotee told me one time, has anybody thrown you out of the cliff? Not yet. Has anybody thrown you in a pit of snakes? Not yet. But still he chanted the Lord's name and he never gave up. And we may, as women, especially, I speak for all the women-bodied people here, that we do go through a lot of love and hate and distress, and there's so much to really absorb in this material world. But at the end of it, Krishna's here. Jagannath is our strength. When he said, "I'm going to take care of you," we should believe. And that's the love, that's the assurance. And when we chant the holy name, it gives us, and I have noticed the phase when your chanting goes down and you don't do it the way your acharyas have prescribed, that's when the iron is hot and somebody hits you and you'll blast off. But I personally think if I take my medicine at the right time, at the right moment, and I associate with devotees like Sai Mataji, who's come here to do stitching with me for Radha Govind Dev Ji, for Radha Ashtami, my faith gets strengthened. No matter what we go through, Krishna gives that extra push and say, Mataji, you can do this. Mataji, you can. And if the day we are weak, we join hands like this, we come to association and say, each one of us has a problem that can never be solved. And it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to discuss that. It's okay to hug each other virtually, even virtually right now. And we community, we're children of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would never want us. And I really admire the way you said, hold on to the pinky finger of Prabhupada. He is our savior, and no matter who comes in our life and goes in our life, but Prabhupada will always be there. And if we do what he wants us to do, we will always go to the progressive path. So thank you all to all the devotees for inspiring me always.
Thank you. Thank you
Sai,
for.
Sai, you're right there in the room with Sundari Priya. Do you want to add anything additional?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'm not sure what I can add since I joined a little later this morning. I would like to thank Anjali Mataji for her brave and honest words. I agree with Sundari Priya Mataji that fear is one of the important paths to humility, because fear is very honest, and humility, I think, is fundamentally, or should be, you know, if we are looking to cultivate humility, when I want to really examine the humility in myself, what I'm ultimately wanting to examine is honesty about myself. And fear. Fear is very honest. Fear rarely lets you lie for very long. And so fear is absolutely one way to get very, very honest with yourself, and you feel very humble because you get your pretense stripped away very quickly. But it's only one way, and hopefully it's not the only way that that I will become honest with myself. Hopefully that there are other ways that I will come to know myself honestly, and become situated in honest knowledge about myself. Because fear, there are also many lies about fear, because when fear becomes pathological, when we are worried about everything, needlessly so, and when I stop relying on Krishna, when I think that he has no influence in my life, when I think that he has no guidance for me whatsoever, when I think that he disregards me and disregards my presence in his creation, that's not a very honest fear, and that leads me to some pathological fears. And I think that it is my responsibility to solve all of my worries and all of my anxieties, and that's not very productive. And that is not an honest assessment of myself, and that leads to a lack of humility, because then I think, oh, it's all my fault. Oh, it's all my responsibility. Oh, it's all up to me. Oh, I'm in this by myself. And I'm not. I'm surrounded by devotees. I'm surrounded by people who care about me. And certainly I am surrounded by and infused by Krishna. And I have to remember that even when there are many challenges. And I relate a great deal to the obstacles that Anjali Mataji related in her personal experiences.
Wow, for someone who started off by saying you didn't know what you had to add, that was amazing.
Yes, thank you.
You know,
thank you for letting me speak.
I'm always amazed at the deep insights that Sai has. You know, she's just like amazingly thoughtful.
The devotees bring it out. It's all your credit.
Glad to have something to do with that.
And thank you, Caru Prabhu, for having these associations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pavan's a professional psychologist and a devotee. So can you tell us about something about fear and psychology and Krishna consciousness, Pavana?
I absolutely can. You know, what I see a lot of is, you know, what Sai Mataji just mentioned, you know, irrational fear, irrational anxiety. And people just get themselves so worked up and so to the point of paranoia, right? And I know in my own life, whenever something comes along that makes me feel fearful, right, whatever it might be, I've always turned to God and said, please help me. And boom, the situation resolves itself shortly, in short time. But as a psychologist, anxiety in this point in our time with this pandemic is higher in our country, maybe in the world, than it's ever been. You know, so we're all experiencing a little bit of that. And we just have to trust that Krishna will get us through it. And he is the answer.
I remember a story in one of the talks that the bully from the block appeared at this boy's door. He opened the door and there's this big bully, and he said, I want you to come outside. I'm going to beat you up. And the boy, who was much smaller, much more slightly built than the bully, he said, I'm not afraid of you. And he said, well, you should be, because I'm standing on your doorstep and I'm calling you out. Come on out, and I'm going to make you bloody. He says, why in the world wouldn't you be afraid of me if you were in your right mind? To all appearances, you're outnumbered, you're outmanned, you're about to get thumped. So why would you be calm and peaceful and without fear? And the little boy said, because my big brother is standing right beside me out of your view, and he's twice as big as you. So it's like you've said, Sai said, you said, Sundari Priya said, you know, it's our part. Our part. Krishna will do everything, but we have to do our part, which is to always chant and always remember that our big brother, our Father, who controls millions and millions of universes, is doing this with us. We simply have to invite him in, and we simply have to remind ourselves that we're not doing this by ourselves. That's the way to avoid unreasonable, what you call pathological fears.
Pathological paranoia, that sort of thing. And, you know, I have occasion where, you know, my clients on occasion will say, will you pray with me? And I say, of course. You know, and we talk about God and turn it over to God and ask him for help. And it's helpful for them to think that's their big brother, that's their go-to. Yeah, they have someone to turn to.
I remember a couple of Sundays ago, we gave the example of Abraham Lincoln. The Battle of Gettysburg, on which the fate of the whole nation hinged, was in progress. And he was getting messengers every 45 minutes. A new messenger would come to give him an update on the battle. And he was so fearful for the state of the Union, for the continuance of the United States of America, so full of stress and anxiety. He couldn't stand it any longer. So he went into his inner room. He got down on his knees and he said, God, he said, I've done everything I can do. If you want the Union to stay together, it's going to be your choice. Right now, I'm leaving the results of the battle, the results of the future of our country in your hands. And he said at that moment, it was like a great weight had been lifted off of his shoulders. He became free of anxiety and free of fear.
Exactly. So yeah, keep chanting Hare Krishna. And trust in Krishna that he protects us. He absolutely does.
Govinda. Dave.
Hare Krishna. My obeisances to all of the devotees, and I'm particularly delighted to meet you, Anjali, on this call. We've been in that Bhagavatam class together for many months now, and so it is nice to meet you. This is a great conversation we're having, and I think it's an important topic because nobody likes fear and everyone has it. And I really loved what Sundari Priya said, that we really need to have fear in our lives. If we didn't, what would be the incentive to turn to Krishna? I'm certainly no theologian on this subject, but I think it's apparent that fear is one of the essential ingredients of material life. It's part of the material energy, because fear begins right from the moment of birth. It's horrifying fear. And then there are just different gradations and different varieties of fear as you go along. I remember once hearing, and some of you won't know who this is maybe, but Johnny Carson was probably the most famous person in the United States for 30 years. He was the host of The Tonight Show. Everyone watched him. And it was a kinder, gentler country then. People loved Johnny Carson. So personable, great at telling jokes. And I read about him once after he had completed his lengthy stint as the host of The Tonight Show, that he would regularly, before he came out and did his opening monologue, he would go to the bathroom and vomit. He was in such a state of anxiety. And yet he looked completely calm. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, if Johnny Carson is that stressed out that he would actually be physically ill, what about everybody else? Everyone is just dealing with this horrible condition. I've certainly had my share of it in my work and family and everything else, but probably nothing special. And you know, one of the greatest things I ever heard as I got moving in Krishna consciousness, I read someplace, and you've all heard this before, but some smart aleck reporter asked, well, what is it that you experience when you're chanting Hare Krishna? He said, when I'm chanting Hare Krishna, I feel no fear. And I took that as an affirmation of faith. And I have always been able to take myself out of any difficult situation, something that looked too hard, too difficult. There's so many books written on how you actually deal with your fears. And it's always just a wonderful incentive to chant when you're feeling like things are difficult, like spinning out of control, like you're just doing something that you are lacking confidence about. I've just been reading in the third canto. I want to read just a few lines from Prabhupada's purport. This is Lord Kapil teaching his mother, and this is Canto 3, Chapter 30, Text 9. In Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead himself certifies the material world is an impermanent place that is full of miseries. There is no question of happiness in this material world, either individually in terms of family, society, or country. If something is going on in the name of happiness, that is also illusion. Here in the material world, happiness means successful counteraction of the effects of distress. I think that is so revealing. What we mistake for happiness and what people will accept as happiness is, oh, thank goodness I've got that over with. It's just, you get the stress behind you and then you think you're happy, but that's where chanting begins. That's where devotional service begins and can take you to a place where you're not just settling for an absence of anxiety, you're actually being lifted to a communal, you're feeling a connection with creation, because Krishna is a part of all creation, and the chanting will bring you there. And so there's no question of fear in Krishna consciousness. And like Pavana Mataji, I've really gotten very good. Whenever something difficult comes up, I will just always say a prayer. I say, Krishna, I really don't think I can do this by myself. In fact, I don't really think I could do anything by myself. So please help me to work my way through this. That is the great blessing of devotional service. And the amazing thing, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here and taking more than my allotted fair share of time, but we all know that this isn't just a lot of talk. There's so much that is offered in the world that it ends up just being a lot of talk, and it doesn't really get to the ground root of things. It doesn't really change your consciousness. And this is the real thing. Hare Krishna.
Wow, that was great. You know, everything depends upon our application. Krishna consciousness isn't automatic. It's not just because, it's like going to a health club. I've actually seen people that think just because they have a card, they're going to get healthy. You know, they go and they sit in the sauna and then they shower and they leave. They haven't lifted a weight. They haven't gone on the treadmill, but they've just visited. And so they think they can get healthy. So Krishna consciousnus, everything hinges on the application. But here's an example that I'd just like to share with you briefly. And then maybe we can hear from Amrita Sundari, and Anjali, jump in at any time with your responses. But I read on the internet a few years ago about a devotee in his last stages, and we're hearing a lot of that now because devotees are getting old. And I just got a message from Gauravani that 2 devotees now in Vrindavan are in the hospital with COVID and they're not doing well. He asked everyone to pray for them. This was pre-COVID by a few years. The devotee was riddled with cancer. He had tumors all over his body. He was skin and bones. He was 70 pounds or so. And it was going to be only an hour, in fact, before he passed away. He had lost all of his speech. He couldn't see. He could barely hear. And there had been another devotee who was tending him for the last few weeks or so. So just an hour before he passed away, in extremis, in every single conceivable way, dwindled down to practically nothing, just life air, some or other circulating for the last few minutes amongst the bones and the flesh. The devotee that was tending this devotee, he asked him, "How are you doing?" And against all odds, against all expectations, the devotee was too weak and too far gone to even verbally answer him. But somehow he heard the question, and he did this on his bed. He hardly had the strength, but he did this. He gave his caretaker a thumbs up, and 45 minutes later, he was gone. So that's what Krishna consciousness is when you apply it in your life practically. Amrita Sundari, do you have anything to add?
I think fear for a devotee, we can just see it as a impetus from Krishna to go near him. You know, when we are fearful, I always, in the end, when I analyze why I was fearful, then it is due to some attachments, you know, somewhere where I have not put Krishna. You know, it's some attachments which doesn't involve Krishna. And it's hard to be so detached as of now, but we're working towards it. But at the end of every episode, if you can just see Krishna's arrangement in it, you know, to just draw you closer to him, then even the most inauspicious situation becomes favorable. It doesn't hurt us anymore. It doesn't bother us anymore. I remember a time there was for the walk to my son's school, on the way, there was a ferocious dog in one of the neighborhood houses. And the lady knew the dog was very mean, and she used to keep him tied, and she was training him. Every day I could see her training him. And one day I was walking alone, and I saw the dog running fast towards me. And all I could say was Krishna, because I knew I'm gone. I thought he was not on the leash, and that's it. I'm gone. And all I could say was Krishna. And then, like, just 1 feet away from me, he stopped because he was on the leash. I couldn't see it because of fear. And then till today, I relish the fact that I said Krishna, probably without any offense. And that was my purest call to Krishna. You know, so now I'm not traumatized by the experience that I got so scared, but I'm glad that I could call out to Krishna at that time, you know, so that became my asset, you know. So nothing is meaningless. Every fearful situation that we are put in, whether psychologically or physically or emotionally, it just to nudge us closer to Krishna. And if you can see Krishna winking there somewhere, you know, you won't regret it, you know. It becomes your friend. That situation becomes your friend. That's all.
The practice should be, we start loving Krishna out of fear, but the practice should move that we love Krishna out of love.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Thank you.
Mataji, I used to have a lot of party. My 6 months used to be booked in advance. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, lot of parties. You're not alone. And those same people now call me sometime, and then they feel so, sometime envy, sometime blessed. Oh, why are you so calm? And how are you so calm and stuff? You know? So
I can completely relate to Prabhuji and Mataji. In my past life, I was a flight attendant. My evening started at 11 p.m. and I came back home at 4 o'clock. So with all the crew, so it was not Brahma Muhurta. I was like, what is this ungodly hour? That's what I used to call it, ungodly hour. So been there, done that. Unless we experience fear out of, we would not have appreciated what we have today, you know. So it's because we had those experiences where we know what the nectar is today.
One thing that's helpful too is to recognize that we wouldn't have gotten this far. We wouldn't be where we are today, nor would we be who we are had not we had circumstances when we were fearful and when we were afraid. We each one and every one of us has a history, and so sometimes when you face something that has a potential to be fearful, it's helpful to review your history, you know, to keep, maybe even write it down as a permanent record, put it on your refrigerator. You know, the times that you knew you didn't think that you would survive, you didn't think you would get out of this, and yet you did, you know, against all odds. Krishna saved you, and he's always guiding us. He's always protecting us. There are 52 million ways to die. So the fact that you got up this morning means that Krishna is always working behind the scenes, protecting you. He's got things for you to do. But there have been overt circumstances, at least I'm sure in each and every one of our lives. There are at least a dozen instances that we could make short notes on them in shorthand, put them up in the refrigerator, and whenever we faced an impossible situation, just go to that list, look at all the other impossible situations that we faced in the past and that Krishna got us through. You know, they say that the soldier, every time he goes into combat, he's terrified. There's no such thing as a brave soldier. They're all terrified. But once you do it a second time or a third time or a fourth time, once you have a history, eventually fear doesn't sustain itself over a long period of time and repeated encounters. Eventually you learn to master your fear, and then you learn to conquer your fear, and then you learn to be clear-headed, cool and calm, even in the midst of the storm. So like so many
I have to agree.
Yeah,
I have to agree, Charu Prabhu, that today, this morning, actually, right after telling my older god brother how I am his little god sister, and to look at me that way, as his little god sister, not as something else. In that same messaging time, I got a message from Vishwambar Seth from the Mayapuris, It's actually floating on the internet right now, of a beautiful, beautiful guitar acoustic rendition that he did for a devotee's father that was passing away, Jaya Radha Madhava. And it was in that video, goodness knows all of us have heard Jaya Radha Madhava how many times, right? But it was so sweet that in the most terrifying moment, where every single step, 52 million ways to die, and every single one of us wants to miss it, but we know it's coming. At that moment, when he sang Jaya Radha Madhava, intimately, out of love, and you can see the devotee is flesh and bones on the patient bed. It was beautiful. Death was finally beautiful. And in love, you could hear the love being sung. And it really, I could truthfully hear Radha, Madhava, Kunja, Bihari. I don't think I've never heard the words speak so clearly as at that moment when it's usually fear, death, doorstep right there. And it was the most beautiful thing ever. It really was. And I thank you all for realizing that the most pathological, I actually wrote down on the side, keyword pathological. The biggest ruminating fear that we have is fear of death and not being able to meet it appropriately or be ready for it. So I thank you, Charu Prabhu, for the thumbs up. I think this is going to be my anchoring technique, to think of one pointedness towards Krishna, whatever anarthas that I might have, but bend those and remember the thumbs up. I really want to have this symbol too when I die. And I hope you guys can hear that rendition of Jaya Radha Madhava, because wow.
Okay. It says Etad nirvijamananam ijatam akuto bayam harinamanu kirtanam. It says to be free from fear, one should always, and as much as possible, chant the holy names of Krishna. So would home of Ras Vilas and Amrita Sundari like to close out this weekly Sanga with some Harinama Sankirtanam, which would cause us to become eventually abhayam, free from fear.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So since Mataji mentioned Jaya Radha Madhav, so we'll just start with that and then continue for a few minutes. Sankirtan. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava,
Thank you for that nice kirtan. Wow, you're adding a lot of songs to your repertoire now, Ras Vilas. Every week, you're expanding and getting better and better. Thanks to Sundari Priya, Pavana, Radhe Sham, Kamo, Kapil. Thanks for joining us, Anjali, Govinda, Amrita Sundari, Ras Vilas. Next week, it'll just be a few days prior to Radhastami. I don't ask this lightly, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was a brand new devotee in Australia, Radhastami came up, I was giving all the classes then. So I told everybody, yeah, tonight I'll give a class on Radharani. And I didn't have anything prepared to read or anything. I thought I would just tap into my general knowledge about Radha and speak extempore. Krishna struck me with dumbness. You know, we chanted Jaya Radha Madhava, and I opened my mouth, and honestly, my mind, Krishna I wasn't qualified to speak. I thought I was in my naivete and my pride. I thought, yeah, I'll give a class on Radharani tonight. I was struck dumb. I couldn't say a word. I was like, So it's not lightly that I ask if anybody would like to do a report on Radharani. And from my own experience, I suggest you have something in front of you to read, not try to go up the top of your head. That's the word of wisdom for you. Of course, you may be more advanced than I was at that time, but I still wouldn't do it even now. But is there anybody that's moved to share with us some passages from Nectar Devotion and other supplementary literatures next Sunday, so we can get into the mood of anticipation, excitement, expectation for celebrating Radhastami during the following week?
I can start, Prabhu, but I would say start. I'm not saying I will say everything, few things, and then all of us can contribute.
Yeah, if everybody can pick one or pick passage A, and then if someone else took it, then have a fallback passage. There's a lot of nectar in the teachings of Chaitanya, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and also in the Nectar Devotion, and you may even know some supplementary literatures of the Goswamis, which are translated in English. So share that. And then if there's any other extra time, our verse would be the 15th verse, first canto, first chapter, which reads in English, O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. That will be nominally the verse for next week, if there's time after discussing or glorifying the Queen of Devotion, Srimati Radharani.
Okay.
Anybody have any last benedictions for us? Words of wisdom before we close out this week?
I don't think it's a benediction, but I thank you for allowing me to join in on the group. Thank you for putting faces behind the names. Thank you, George Prabhu and Pavani Mataji and Sundari Priya and Sai Mataji. Thank you for opening up your hearts as well and feeling not alone. And because I heard your mandate, Charu Prabhu, I guess I got butted in to share as well for Radhastami. So, okay. All right. I'm contributing too. Thank you for the service.
All right. So we'll hear something from most of our members next week on Srimati Radharani. Thank you again for joining us, every one of us. Every week that we meet together, some or other we get to know each other more. Everyone contributes to the whole. Every one of us makes each and every other one stronger, purifies us, and helps us to be more intense about moving forward in devotional service. Those sages who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them. So thank you all for sanctifying me week after week during these sangas. Panchakalpatarubhyascha
Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo.